Today we're going to be taking a basic t-shirt pattern and doing a little bit of pattern hacking to make it into a really stylish summer dress. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Christine, founder of Sewing in the City. And if you remember, a couple weeks ago, I posted a really big fabric haul, and one of the fabrics that I have is this silky jersey knit from Minerva Fabrics in this gorgeous navy blue. So this fabric is from their core range. It's 95% polyester with 5% elastin. So it has a really, really nice stretch. It's super soft, and look at the drape. Like, it's just drapey and buttery. It is 60 inches wide, so I have 2 meters here. So the fabric was gifted to me by Minerva, and part of the brand ambassador program is I had the opportunity to choose a free pattern to go with the fabric. So I chose this one by Style Arc, thinking I would make this view. And I was thinking to just omit the shoulder pads and just do kind of a really soft, drapey dress. But when the pattern came, it's size 10 to 22. So it's too big of a size for me. And I thought about grading it down, but this armhole construction that they have is quite complicated. So I've decided to take my own Rivington t-shirt pattern, which is a basic crew neck t-shirt. It also comes with a V-neck and the classic short sleeve. So I'm going to be taking this pattern, using it as my base to make a sleeveless dress. We're going to be doing 3 different pattern hacks today. The first is I'm going to make the neckband a bit more narrow because this fabric is quite slinky, and I also want the look of the dress to be a little bit more elevated. So I'm going to, this is a Rivington t-shirt that I've worn quite a bit, but you can see the neckline is rather wide. So I'm going to be making this a bit more narrow, I think it's going to give it a bit more of an elevated, kind of finer look. The second hack is I'm going to omit the sleeves altogether to get the sleeveless look. And instead of the sleeves, I'm going to put a band around the armhole. And then the third pattern hack we're going to be doing is lengthening the t-shirt, because obviously it's a t-shirt. So we need to lengthen this into I think I'm going to have it fall just around maybe above my ankle, depending on how much I can fit on the 2 meters of fabric. So I need to be mindful to make sure that the hip area is a wide enough dimension in order to fit over my hips. So to lengthen a pattern, we can't necessarily just add more length to it. We have to make sure that the hip area, which is the widest point of most of our bodies, I'm going to have enough fabric to go around my hips. And then along with the lengthening, I'm also going to be adding a slit up the side for just a little bit of leg kind of showing through. So that is the plan for the dress. So I love pattern hacking because obviously you can take a pattern that you know and love, fits you, you love it, and just add a couple or just make a few changes that kind of give the pattern a new look, a new life, without having to buy a new pattern, and you can really expand your own creativity. Pattern hacking is really fun, simple supplies. I just have my measuring tape. I have some actual tape. All I have is masking tape at the moment, some paper, scissors, and some scrap paper. So let's get started. The first pattern hack I'm going to be working on is my neckband. So I've grabbed this new Bleecker sweatshirt that's hot off the press. I've just been finishing sewing it up, and I love the width of this neckband. So all I'm going to do is just measure out this neckband. I know that it's a 1/2 inch wide finished. So if I double that, that's 1 inch. And then from that inch, I'm going to add seam allowances on either side. All in all, I'm going to cut a new neckband that is 2 1/8 inch wide, and just the same length as my pattern calls for. So the same length around my neck, but just a slightly less wide of a neckband. here's our new neckband. The next pattern hack I'm going to be working on are my armhole bands. And this is a pattern we are going to create from scratch. But I already know that I want my armhole bands to be the same width as my neckband that we just created. So I already know it's going to be 2 1/8 of an inch wide. And now we just need to figure out the length, how much fabric we need to go around our armhole. To do that, I'm going to take my front and my back pattern pieces, and I'm going to measure the finished circumference of my armhole. So how I'm going to do that is just take my flexible tape measure. I'm not counting the seam allowance, so I'm just looking for the finished circumference of my armholes. So this is my front, and it is approximately 8 3/4. So then my back, I'll do the same, keeping my tape measure up and down as opposed to flat, just starting right, not counting my seam allowance. And this one is just about 7 3/4. So now I'm going to add my back dimension, 7 3/4, so 7.75. Plus my front, 8.75. I'll add those together, which is 16.5. Now I'm going to figure out what is 10% of 1650. 1550 times 90%. So 14.85. So let's say 14.75 becomes our new the length of our neckband minus 10%, but we need to add a seam allowance because we're going to sew our neckband in around. So now I'm going to add 5/8 of an inch on either side of the neckband, so 1.25, and I find 9, 10. I'm going to cut my new neckband 16 inches long by 2 1/8 wide. So here's my new armhole pattern. Instead of cutting 2 at 16 inches long, I divided the 16 inches that I needed for the circumference in half and then made a note for myself, cut 2 on the fold. So if I cut 2 pattern pieces like this, then I'll have 2 armholes at 16 inches in circumference by 2 1/8 of an inch wide. For our final pattern hack, we are going to be extending our t-shirt pattern into a dress. And in order to do this, we're going to need 2 measurements from our own body. The first is we're going to need our hip measurement. And if you haven't taken your hip measurement before, you just want to measure around the widest part of your bum, the part that protrudes out the most. That's going to be your hip measurement. The second measurement we need to take from our body is we need to measure from our natural waistline to that hip measurement. So to find our natural waistline, you can stand up straight and then just tip your body to one side, and you'll feel like a natural bend point in your body, and that is your natural waistline. So it's often higher than I think we may think. Mine is about an inch or so above my belly button, actually. So I'm going to measure from that point, that bend point, down to my hip, and that is 13 inches. And that's a fairly standard measurement, actually, from waist to hip is in general 13 inches. So now let's get our measurements onto our paper. The first thing that I have is my front pattern piece, and I'm just going to lay it down on my scrap piece of paper with enough paper below it for my extension of my skirt. So I'm just kind of taping, placing my pattern high enough, and I actually have a straight edge here. So I'm just lining up my center front of my pattern along with this straight edge. It's one less place that I have to actually cut. And I'm going to tape my pattern down to my paper. And I should note that if you don't want to mess up your original pattern at all, you could make a copy, but this is just tape, so I'm not overly worried about it. Now that I have my pattern taped to my scrap paper, the first thing I'm going to do is mark in my hip line. So to do that, we need to identify the approximate waistline of our pattern. You can do that by holding up the pattern to your body and identifying where your natural waistline falls on the pattern. So from that line, we're going to measure our 13 inches down, and I'm just going to mark this line in. So now we need to figure out the width of our hip. So we've done our measurements. Mine was 36 inches around. That's how much fabric I need in order to cover my hip. But do I want my fabric to be exactly my hip measurement, or would I prefer a little bit of ease so the fabric is not tight around my bum? And yes, I definitely want ease. So I think I'm going to add about an inch to my hip measurement, and that's going to give me my final width of how wide I need to cut my fabric. So my hip measured 36 inches, so I'm going to add an inch to that, 37. Then I'm going to divide that number by 4 because I have 2 fronts and 2 backs, a front placed on the fold and a back placed on the fold. So that will give me 9 1/4. So along my hip line, I'm just going to measure 9 1/4, and I'll make a marking. But that is our finished garment measurement. So I need to add seam allowance to that number. So I'm going to add 5/8 of an inch, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that gives me 9 7/8. So 9 7/8 is my final cutting line. And so it's a very subtle, but this is my final cutting line, and this is the cutting line of my t-shirt. There's about a 1/2 inch difference there. And so what I need to do now is just a bit of creative drawing. So I'm going to smooth out this line, and I'm just starting, just a bit below my waistline of my pattern, and I'm just kind of drawing a nice soft line until I match the new cutting line. And then from there, I'm going to bring this new cutting line all the way down to my hem. I can make this however long I want it to be. I'm going to make mine about 33 inches from my waistline in order to be a nice kind of a maxi style on this dress. So I cut out my pattern. I wanted to show you the final result. See how it's just such a subtle amount that I added in the hip area, but that is going to allow me to have enough fabric to go around my hip line and actually have a little bit of ease there. All of my pattern hacking is done. I've lengthened the dress, I've added my armholes, and I've decreased the width of my neckband. So now that all that's left to do is get to sewing. I am so happy with the way this dress has turned out. I've been sewing for the last couple hours. It really came together quite quickly. If you're interested in learning more about knits, I do have a video called All About Knits. I will drop the iCard in one of the corners, and also I'll drop the link below in the description box. I also have a video called How to Make a T-shirt Using Only Your Serger, which would be totally applicable in this case. So I'll drop the link to that video below as well. And if you'd like to shop my patterns, I'm wearing my Sullivan sweatshirt today. I love this sweatshirt. I have a whole bunch of other patterns, the Rivington t-shirt, which we used today for this dress. You can do so at sewingandthecity.com. I'll also drop all of the links below. Without further ado, here is my t-shirt hacked into a dress.
Oh!